The story of art does not begin in the grand museums of Europe or the storied galleries of Asia. It begins in Africa. This is the continent where humanity itself was born, and with it, the very first sparks of human creativity. Long before people built cities or wrote down their histories, they were creating art. They were expressing their thoughts, their fears, and their dreams. We are talking about a time so deep in the past it is hard to imagine. The evidence is scattered across the continent, a testament to the enduring human need to make our mark on the world, to communicate something essential about who we are and the world we inhabit. It is a story that starts not with a canvas, but with stone, shell, and earth. To find the world's oldest art, we must travel to a cave in South Africa. Here at Blombos Cave, archaeologists discovered something truly remarkable. They found pieces of ochre, a type of reddish clay engraved with geometric patterns. These are not accidental scratches, they are deliberate designs made by a thinking, feeling human being over 75,000 years ago. This is the earliest known evidence of abstract art. Think about that for a moment. Tens of thousands of years before the famous cave paintings of Lascaux in France, our African ancestors were already thinking symbolically. They were creating a language of shapes and lines, a foundational step in the journey of human expression. These humble markings are a profound link to our deepest past. The creativity did not stop with engraved stones. In the same Blombos Cave and at other sites like it, scientists also found the world's first jewelry. These were not made of gold or diamonds, but of something far more accessible: tiny sea snail shells. Each shell was carefully pierced with a hole, allowing it to be strung onto a cord. These beads, dating back more than 75,000 years, tell us so much. They tell us that our ancestors cared about adornment and personal identity. They were not just surviving, they were living. They were decorating their bodies, perhaps to show their status, their group affiliation, or simply to express their sense of beauty. This is art in its most personal form, worn on the body as a statement to the world. From these early beginnings, the seeds of artistic tradition were planted across the African continent. We find evidence in early tools that are not just functional, but also beautifully crafted, showing a pride in workmanship. We see it in the use of pigments to color objects and perhaps even bodies. This long, slow dawn of creativity set the stage for everything that would follow. It established Africa not just as the cradle of humanity, but as the cradle of art itself. The desire to create, to beautify, and to communicate through objects is one of the most fundamental aspects of being human. And that journey, for all of us, no matter where our ancestors came from, started right here, in Africa. In the West, we often think of art as something to be hung on a wall in a quiet museum, to be looked at and admired from a distance. But in the long history of Africa, art was rarely made just for the sake of beauty. It was deeply woven into the fabric of daily life and spiritual belief. Art had a job to do. A sculpture was not just a statue. It could be a home for an ancestor's spirit. A mask was not just a costume piece. It was a tool that allowed a dancer to channel a powerful force of nature during a ceremony. This art was active, it was dynamic, and it was essential to the well-being of the community. It was art with a profound and immediate purpose. The materials used by early African artists were sourced directly from their environment. Wood was carved, clay was molded, plant fibers were woven, and metals were forged. These materials were not chosen at random. Each had its own meaning and its own power. A carver might choose a specific type of wood for a ritual object because that tree was believed to have special spiritual properties. The process of creating the art was often a ritual in itself, accompanied by chants or prayers. The artist was not just a craftsperson but often a respected specialist, someone who understood how to bridge the gap between the physical world and the spiritual realm through their work, making objects that were both beautiful and powerful. Consider the incredible rock art galleries found across the continent, from the Sahara Desert to the mountains of South Africa. These paintings and engravings were not simple decorations. Many are located in places that are difficult to reach, suggesting they were sacred sites. The images often depict scenes of hunting, dancing, and spiritual transformation, showing figures that are part human, part animal. These were likely created as part of important rituals, perhaps to ensure a successful hunt, to teach the younger generation about their history and beliefs, or to connect with the spirit world. The art was a vital part of the community's spiritual technology, a way of interacting with the forces that governed their lives. This focus on function and spirit means that the meaning of an art object was often more important than its physical form. A statue representing a king's power was powerful because of the rituals performed with it and the beliefs associated with it, not just because of its lifelike appearance. This is a very different way of thinking about art. It is not about capturing a perfect image of the world, but about creating an object that can actively shape the world. It is art that heals, protects, teaches, and connects. It is a living art, infused with the soul of the people who made it and used it, a testament to a worldview where the sacred and the everyday are one and the same. When we look at the history of art from other parts of the world, like Europe or Asia, we see ancient stone temples and marble statues that have survived for thousands of years. This has led some to mistakenly believe that Africa did not have a rich artistic past. But the truth is more complex. A vast amount of Africa's artistic heritage has been lost to time, not because it was less valuable, but because of the very nature of the art itself and the materials used to create it. The continent's history is filled with incredible artistic creations, but many were like whispers on the wind, powerful in their moment but not intended to last for eternity. One of the biggest reasons for this loss is the materials themselves. Many African artists worked with organic materials like wood, plant fibers, textiles, and unfired clay. In the tropical climates that cover much of the continent, these materials decay quickly. Wood is eaten by termites, fibers rot in the humidity, and unfired clay dissolves in the rain. An intricately carved wooden mask, used in a single powerful ceremony, might have been left to return to the earth afterward. Its purpose was fulfilled. The idea was not to create a permanent monument, but to create an object with power for a specific time and place. The spiritual energy was what mattered, not the eternal preservation of the physical object. Another key reason is that art was not typically preserved in the way we think of it today. There were no museums or climate-controlled vaults. Art objects were tools for living, and like any tool, they were used until they wore out. A worn-out textile might be discarded, or a broken pot replaced. Furthermore, the value of an object could be tied to its use in a ritual. Once the ritual was complete, the object might lose its sacred power and be respectfully disposed of. The focus was on the continuity of the tradition, not the preservation of every single object. A new mask would be carved for the next ceremony, carrying on the same style and spiritual purpose as the one before it. Finally, the movements of people and the disruptions of history played a major role. Over centuries, communities migrated, wars were fought, and societies changed. During these upheavals, art objects were often left behind, destroyed, or lost. Unlike heavy stone monuments, smaller, portable art forms could disappear easily. The very idea of collecting and saving art for future generations was not a priority for many cultures. The history and beliefs were passed down through oral traditions and the continuous recreation of art forms, not by storing old objects. Understanding this helps us appreciate the true richness of Africa's artistic past, even if we can only see fragments of it today. The arrival of European colonial powers in Africa during the 19th and 20th centuries marked a dramatic and often tragic turning point for the continent's artistic traditions. For centuries, African art had been created for specific cultural and spiritual purposes, its meaning understood within its community. The colonizers, however, arrived with their own ideas about art, civilization, and value. They did not see the intricate spiritual systems behind the sculptures and masks. Instead, they often saw these objects as primitive, idolatrous, or simply as curiosities to be collected. This profound misunderstanding had devastating consequences for the perception and fate of African art. One of the most immediate impacts was the large-scale removal of art from the continent. Soldiers, administrators, missionaries, and traders took vast quantities of cultural treasures from Africa. The most infamous example is the British punitive expedition against the Kingdom of Benin in 1897. The British Army sacked Benin City, looting thousands of exquisite bronze and ivory sculptures from the royal palace. These masterpieces, which chronicled the kingdom's history and glorified its rulers, were shipped to Europe and sold to museums and private collectors. This was not just theft, it was the erasure of a nation's historical records, torn from their context and scattered across the globe, where they remain to this day. Beyond the physical removal of objects, colonialism worked to suppress the creation of traditional art. Missionaries often condemned local spiritual practices, viewing masks and sculptures as symbols of paganism that needed to be destroyed. They encouraged converts to abandon their traditions, and in some cases they actively burned ritual objects. Colonial administrators also disrupted the systems of patronage that had supported artists for generations. The carver who once worked for a king or a powerful religious society found that his patrons had lost their power. The very reasons for creating art were being undermined, leading to a decline in the production of many traditional forms. This colonial encounter created a new, distorted lens through which African art was viewed. It was relabeled as primitive art and judged not on its own terms, but by how it compared to European artistic standards. Its complex meanings were ignored, and it was appreciated mainly for its exotic forms and abstract qualities. This legacy of misunderstanding and removal is something that scholars, museums, and African nations are still grappling with today. The story of African art in the colonial period is a powerful reminder of how easily cultural treasures can be lost, and how important it is to see art through the eyes of the people who created it. The artistic landscape of Africa is, honestly, just incredibly diverse, with countless styles and traditions developed over thousands of years. To truly appreciate this history, we can look at some of the most important and influential art forms that have been discovered. The journey begins with the continent's ancient rock art, found in places like Tassili N'Ajjer in Algeria and the Drakensberg Mountains in South Africa. These paintings and engravings, some dating back over 10,000 years, are Africa's oldest libraries. They show us vivid scenes of daily life, from hunting massive buffalo to herding cattle. They also depict spiritual ceremonies, with mysterious figures in elaborate costumes, giving us a priceless window into the beliefs of these ancient peoples. Moving forward in time, we arrive at one of the earliest known traditions of sculpture in sub-Saharan Africa, the Nok culture of Nigeria. Active from around 1500 BCE to 500 CE, the Nok people created stunning terracotta, or fired clay, figures. These sculptures, which are nearly life-sized, depict human heads with distinctive features like triangular eyes, elaborate hairstyles, and expressive mouths. We do not know their exact purpose, but they were likely part of important rituals or served as ancestral portraits. The Nok culture proves that sophisticated artistic traditions with a unique and recognizable style were flourishing in West Africa thousands of years ago, long before contact with the outside world. Further south, in present-day South Africa, another remarkable early sculptural tradition emerged. The Lydenburg heads, dating to around 500 CE, are a set of 7 terracotta heads, 2 of which are large enough to have been worn as helmet masks. They are the earliest known examples of Iron Age sculpture from southern Africa. With their simple, stylized features, they are powerful and honestly quite enigmatic. Like the Nok heads, their exact function is a mystery, but they were clearly important ceremonial objects for their community. They demonstrate that the impulse to create three-dimensional art was a widespread phenomenon across the continent, developing independently in different regions with unique local styles. The medieval period in West Africa saw the rise of extraordinary metalworking traditions, particularly in what is now Nigeria. The city of Ife, the spiritual homeland of the Yoruba people, produced breathtakingly realistic bronze and brass heads around the 12th to 15th centuries. These sculptures are so naturalistic that early European scholars refused to believe they were made in Africa. Nearby, the Kingdom of Benin developed its own legendary bronze casting tradition, creating thousands of plaques and sculptures that decorated the royal palace. These Benin bronzes are a detailed historical record, depicting kings, court rituals, and encounters with European traders, a true masterpiece of storytelling in metal. Africa is not a single country, and its art is not a single style. The continent is, a vast mosaic of different cultures, each with its own unique artistic voice. To understand this rich tapestry, it helps to focus on some of the key places and periods where artistic innovation really flourished. Nigeria stands out as a true powerhouse of creativity throughout history. It is the home of the ancient knot culture, which we now know produced the earliest terracotta sculptures in sub-Saharan Africa. Later, between the 12th and 15th centuries, the Yoruba city of Ife became a center for some of the most sophisticated and naturalistic bronze and brass casting the world has ever seen, creating portraits of rulers with astonishing realism and grace. Just a short distance from Ife, the Kingdom of Benin rose to prominence from the 13th century onward. The artists of Benin, working for the powerful Oba or king, created the world-famous Benin bronzes. These were not just sculptures, but historical documents cast in metal, recording the kingdom's history, its courtly life, and its traditions on thousands of intricate plaques. In Central Africa, the Kingdom of Congo, which spanned parts of modern-day Angola and the Democratic Republic of Congo, developed its own powerful artistic traditions. Congo artists were masters of wood carving, creating striking power figures known as Ankizi Nkondi, which were studded with nails and believed to hold spiritual forces that could settle disputes or punish wrongdoers. Further west, in modern-day Ghana, the Asante Empire became famous for its incredible skill in textiles and metalwork. The Asante are renowned for their kente cloth, a vibrant, woven textile with complex patterns, where each design has a specific name and meaning. Originally reserved for royalty, kente cloth has become a powerful symbol of African identity and pride around the world. The Asante were also masters of goldwork, creating intricate gold weights known as abramuo. These small brass figures, used for weighing gold dust, were miniature sculptures depicting proverbs, animals, and scenes from daily life, showcasing immense creativity in a tiny form. Heading south, the region of southern Africa has its own ancient and profound artistic legacy. The stone-walled city of Great Zimbabwe, which flourished between the 11th and 15th centuries in modern Zimbabwe, was a marvel of architecture and sculpture. The most famous artifacts from this site are the monumental soapstone birds, which stood on pillars and are believed to represent the spirits of former rulers, connecting the earthly kings with the spiritual realm. From the rock paintings of the San people to the masterful beadwork of the Zulu and Ndebele peoples, Southern Africa boasts a continuous and dynamic history of artistic expression, deeply tied to the land and the identity of its communities. At the beginning of the 20th century, a group of young, rebellious artists in Paris were looking for a way to break free from the traditional rules of European art. They were tired of trying to create perfect, realistic images of the world. They wanted to find a new way of seeing, a new visual language that was more direct, more powerful, and more expressive. They found their inspiration in the African sculptures and masks that were beginning to appear in Parisian flea markets and ethnographic museums. These objects, taken from their original homes during the Colonial period, were about to spark a revolution in Western art. Artists like Pablo Picasso, Henri Matisse, and Amedeo Modigliani were captivated by what they saw. They were struck by the bold simplification of form, the abstract features, and the raw emotional power of African art. Picasso's groundbreaking 1907 painting, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, is a clear example of this influence. The faces of the two figures on the right are directly inspired by the geometric shapes and sharp angles of African masks he had seen. For Picasso, this was not about copying. It was about learning a new way to represent reality, one that focused on spiritual and emotional truth rather than surface appearance. This encounter helped give birth to Cubism, one of the most important art movements of the 20th century. This influence was not limited to painting. Modern sculptors like Constantine Brancusi and Alberto Giacometti were also deeply inspired by the clean lines and elongated forms of African carvings. They admired the way African artists could convey the essence of a figure with just a few simple shapes. This minimalist and abstract approach became a central feature of modern sculpture. The ripple effect continued into architecture as well. Architects associated with the modernist movement, like Le Corbusier, were drawn to the functional and communal forms of North African vernacular architecture, with its clean, unadorned walls and geometric shapes. They saw in it a beauty that was honest, simple, and connected to its environment. While this global recognition brought new attention to African art, it is important to remember the complicated context. These European artists often knew very little about the original meaning or purpose of the objects they admired. They appreciated them for their form, but were largely unaware of their deep cultural and spiritual significance. This phenomenon, often called primitivism, celebrated the aesthetic power of African art while simultaneously reinforcing colonial ideas about Africa being primitive. Despite this complex legacy, there is no denying the profound and transformative impact that the artistic traditions of Africa had on the course of global art history, forever changing the way we see the world. In recent decades, there has been a powerful movement to reclaim the story of African art and to ensure its legacy is preserved for future generations. This work is happening on many fronts, from the halls of international museums to archaeological sites across Africa. One of the most important and debated issues is the repatriation of art that was taken during the colonial era. African governments, cultural leaders, and activists are increasingly calling for the return of iconic treasures, like the Benin bronzes from the British Museum or the royal treasures of the Asante from collections in the United Kingdom. They argue that these objects are not just art, but essential pieces of their cultural and historical identity that belong in their original homes. At the same time, there is a growing effort to study and display African art within Africa itself. New museums are being built across the continent, designed to world-class standards. The Museum of Black Civilizations in Dakar, Senegal, and the forthcoming Edo Museum of West African Art in Benin City, Nigeria, are just two examples. These institutions are not just places to display objects. They are vital centers for research, education, and cultural pride. They allow African scholars, curators, and artists to take the lead in telling their own stories, interpreting their own heritage, and training the next generation of cultural custodians free from the colonial gaze that shaped so much of the past. Preservation also means protecting Africa's ancient archaeological sites. Across the continent, archaeologists are using new technologies to discover and protect fragile heritage, from ancient rock art threatened by climate change to buried cities that hold the key to understanding Africa's great civilizations. This work is a race against time. These sites face threats from development, erosion, and looting. By protecting them, we are saving the primary evidence of Africa's deep history. This work ensures that future generations can learn directly from the innovations and achievements of their ancestors, providing a foundation of historical knowledge and cultural confidence. This modern quest is ultimately about more than just objects and old stones. It is about dignity, identity, and the right of a people to be the authors of their own story. For centuries, the narrative of African art and history was largely written by outsiders. Today, that is changing. By preserving artifacts, building new cultural institutions, and demanding the return of stolen heritage, Africans are reclaiming their past. This work is essential not only for the continent but for the entire world. It helps to correct the historical record and allows all of us to appreciate the full, rich, and complex tapestry of human creativity in the place where it first began. The history of African art is not a separate, isolated chapter in the story of human creativity. It is the first chapter, the foundational text from which so much else has grown. From the earliest symbolic engravings on a piece of ochre to the vibrant contemporary art scenes in Lagos and Johannesburg today, the continent of Africa has produced an astonishingly rich and diverse artistic legacy. This art tells a story of innovation, resilience, and profound spiritual depth. It shows us that art has always been essential to what it means to be human, serving as a tool for communication, a bridge to the spiritual world, and a marker of identity and community. Understanding this history is crucial because it corrects a long-held and damaging misconception. For too long, Africa was seen as a continent without a history, its artistic creations dismissed as primitive. But as we have seen, Africa was home to great civilizations, sophisticated artistic traditions, and master artists who created works of breathtaking skill and beauty. From the terracotta heads of Nok to the golden weights of the Asante and the majestic bronzes of Benin, these creations are the equal of any artistic tradition in the world. Recognizing this is not just about giving credit where it is due, it is about embracing a more complete and truthful account of our shared human story. The influence of African art continues to shape our world. Its impact on the modern art movements of the 20th century was revolutionary, helping to shatter old conventions and open up new possibilities for expression. Today, contemporary African artists are among the most exciting and innovative voices in the global art world, drawing on their rich heritage while engaging with the pressing issues of our time. The continent's aesthetic principles continue to inspire designers, architects, and creators everywhere. The rhythms, patterns, and forms that originated in Africa are woven into the very fabric of our global culture, a testament to their enduring power and appeal. Ultimately, preserving and celebrating the history of African art is a task for all of humanity. These traditions represent one of the world's great cultural treasures. They offer us unique insights into different ways of seeing the world, different ways of understanding power, community, and the sacred. In a world that can often feel divided, the story of African art reminds us of our common origin and our shared creative impulse. It is a rich and vibrant tapestry woven over millennia, and its threads are connected to all of us. By learning its stories and honoring its masterpieces, we gain a deeper understanding not only of Africa, but of ourselves.